Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Geoff Hackett, and I'm a mental performance consultant at PacificSport, Vancouver Island. So what that means is I'm essentially a person, a professional who works with athletes and coaches on how to build strategies and tools to improve your mental game. And so this series tonight is part of our Elevate series, which is something that my colleague Kevin Lindo organizes. And he put on different education sessions related to kind of a holistic approach to sport. Sometimes some of the discussions and content that come forward are around nutrition or strength and conditioning or rehabilitation, recovery, things like that. So tonight we're going to kind of dive into the mental performance world and speak to you about an important part of your overall performance is how you can focus on what you're supposed to do within your sport, and what are the kind of the challenges that come with focus, and what are some strategies that we can use as athletes, as coaches, that we can apply to and try and improve our ability to stay in the present moment. Before we get going, I just mention that I'm speaking to you tonight on the traditional territory of the Nunavut First Nation, and I'm very grateful to live and work here. So just take a moment to acknowledge where you are. And so as I kind of outlined earlier, just a moment ago, there's going to be a lot of information tonight that I hope you can take and apply to what you do within sport. And where we're kind of going when we talk about focus is just our ability to be able to be present. I'll just make sure we're all muted here. To be present in the current moment. And what that is as an athlete is kind of your ultimate currency. You can't get enough of that, really, in terms of your ability to just stay focused on what you have to do, regardless of the strength or weakness of your opposition. That's ultimately what we're trying to do within our sport, is just be as focused as possible in our sport. And so when we talk about focus, there's going to be a start here where I want to kind of introduce a few kind of areas that are important for us to understand before we talk about different strategies that we can use to focus more effectively. So this is a graph here that kind of outlines a lot of the different outcomes that you can experience in terms of where your mind may go when you're competing in your sport. On the bottom, on the x-axis of this graph here, you have your skill level. And this is kind of a vague definition. It could be your technical skill, could be your mental skills, could be your game understanding, and from a low, medium to a high level. And then on the y-axis is your challenge level of the situation, from a low, medium, and high level. And so the ultimate here is when we want to find an ability to focus on what we're doing, there's different levels of focus that we can experience. When our skill levels in the situation are low and our challenge of the situation is low, we're not going to be too interested or care too much about what's going on. And as our skill level increases, but our challenge level doesn't, we're going to be kind of bored and kind of not necessarily all that challenged. And that's something that we need to kind of consider as we start to, when you play in your best competitions, and you can think back to your best performances in your sport, there was probably an element of difficulty around the situation that really allowed you to apply yourself in a meaningful way. And so that's what we see as a challenge increases, but our skill level increases, we kind of move away from this anxiety and worry that we may feel in a low skill level, high challenge situation, where the ultimate sort of experience is this flow state. And this is something that's been researched extensively in lots of not even only sports psychology, but just general popular psychology as well. And this is the state of ultimate presence, where you're engaged, you're confident, you kind of lose a perspective of time. There's no sense of judgment or evaluation on how you're doing. You're just kind of, as a expression, in the pocket. You're just in the moment, and you're fully engaged in what you're doing. And some of your best experiences in sport are probably a product of you being in this mental state. And so it's difficult to get here, but it's not impossible. And so there are certain strategies that we can apply to ourselves in order to try and get here. And there's no guarantee of outcome or success. That's kind of the opposite of what flow is intended for anyway. But when we are in this place, we are the most focused, the most engaged. This is a situation where we can experience our highest level of performance. All right. And so there's many examples, many anecdotes of top level athletes in their sport, and they reflect on what it was like when they were extremely clutch under pressure. They were in this kind of flow state where they were totally engaged in the present moment. In order for us to kind of understand focus a little bit more, I want to kind of break down the different types of ways which your attention can go within sport. And this is an important part as well, because we need to kind of understand a little bit more about the kind of the building blocks of focus in order for us to really understand what it means to be focused in our sport. So I want to break down focus in a couple of different ways. And if you take any kind of sports psych 101 course, you'll definitely see this image here. All right. And so this is kind of the two dimensions of focus that we can talk about. Focus can be internal, more like you're paying attention to your own internal thoughts, feelings, physical feelings, or it can be external. All right. And so that's things outside in your environment, your opponents, your teammates, the conditions, the racetrack, anything that's outside of your own self, right? We call this our direction, I should say. We can also be focused from a broad sense, where we're focused on many different things, or a narrow sense, we're only focused on one specific thing. And so this is our width, all right? And so we could look at focus from two different ways, from the direction of our focus and the width of our focus. And so what these create are four different kind of dimensions of focus, we can call them. When you have a broad external type of focus, we're assessing the situation. We're looking at the conditions, the field of play, the bigger picture. And we're taking in lots of different examples. Think of, for example, like a quarterback, at center, scanning the field, reading the defense, looking at where the space is, where's their coverage, all those sorts of situations. There's lots of information being processed quickly, all right? And there's lots going on. If we go into more of a broad internal type of focus, all right, now we're kind of thinking more to ourselves about, okay, what happened in this situation in the past? What are the adjustments I have to make? All right, there's many different kind of things that you're considering and evaluating and looking at from an internal point of view. If we go to more of a narrow internal, it's where we're rehearsing something. We're monitoring our attention. We're mentally rehearsing kind of the execution of a skill. You can think of maybe like a basketball player at a free throw line, just kind of like going through their routine, monitoring their muscle tension, making sure they breathe, kind of seeing and feeling like they're in like this smooth sort of like controlled state in order to fully execute their skill. And then you have a narrow external, where we're just focusing on something in our environment that we need to execute, or a catch, a throw, something like that, where we need to kind of direct our attention to one singular point of focus in our environment. All right. And so as an athlete, it's important for us to understand this, because your brain is constantly going to be shifting around any one of these four areas. And so when we lose our focus, all right, it's not that, we've have this button that turns off in our brain, but we're just shining our focus at the wrong place at the wrong time. All right. And so when you think about what are some of the performances that you struggled in, it could be that you just kind of got stuck in an internal state of focus where you weren't able to really pay attention to what's around you. So you missed cues, you missed parts of your environment that were important for you to have success. You just kind of got stuck in your own thoughts and feelings. On the other side, it could be that you just got too wound up with what's going on outside of you, and you didn't and weren't able to pay attention to something that was an important piece of information from an internal sense. All right. And so focus is very complicated. I'll be the first to admit that. There's lots of stuff that goes on inside your brain for you to focus effectively. And so an easy way to I use to describe it is to use the metaphor of a flashlight. So it's not that you turn your focus on or off. It's just that you shine it at the wrong place at the wrong time. All right. And so my question to you, when you're performing at your best, where do you shine your focus? All right. And so for this, what we kind of need to have a conversation about is that there are different types of sports. And I know that people on this call come from more team sports, more individual sports, more racing sports, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's going to look different, and it's not going to be the same for everyone, whether you play like a dynamic team sport or more of a racing sport, or if you play an individual sport. Those are all things that we need to kind of consider about where you shine your focus. So I talk about focus shifts. And what I mean by that is this idea between internal and external. And everyone is going to shift their focus within their sport. However, some sports are going to shift their focus more than others. All right. And so sports have many, many different types of focus shifts. These are more like possession-based sports. There's an offense, there's a defense, there's moments of transition. All right. You're defending one area, you're trying to attack another area. The hockey, soccer, rugby, basketball, there's many different examples. But in these sports, all right, the picture is always, always, always changing. All right. And your role on the field or on the court or the rink or whatever and wherever you play, the picture is always changing. And you have to have the ability to shift internally. Okay, what do I need to be doing in this moment? And externally, what do I need to be doing in front of me? All right. And this is where in these sports, it takes a really high level of concentration, specifically to be able just to be managing the current moment and staying up to date with what you need to do in the game at a certain moment in time. Sports that have fewer focus shifts, and I don't mean that they don't shift their focus, but they have fewer shifts, okay, are things like racing sports, all right, where you don't necessarily have to shift your focus between externally and internally. You're more focused internally in these sports about, okay, what's next? What am I thinking of? How am I doing? What do I need to kind of direct my attention? You obviously check in with your opponents in a race about where they're at, and you make decisions based off that, but there's fewer shifts of focus. All right. And so I just want you to take a moment just to reflect on sports that you play. And maybe you have an opportunity, if we have some multi-sport athletes, you play like a more possession-based team sport, or you race. All right. And I want you to just kind of consider, like, where do you shift your focus and how often do you shift your focus in the sports that you play? So where we go with this, and what I try and communicate with coaches and also communicate with athletes, is like, okay, well, if we want to understand what our effective focus looks like in our sport, what do we need to think and what do we need to feel when we're competing? All right. And so there's some examples that you can read for yourself here, but we can start like talking about focus in a number of different ways. And one of the more effective kind of routes to go is to talk about, okay, well, what do I need to be thinking about when I'm competing at my best? All right. So if you take the sport of freestyle skiing, you need to have some certain keywords that you're thinking of. You need to think about how you're going to be aggressive in certain moments. You need to be feeling calm and connected and trusting. Like I said, in a sport like soccer or basketball, like I said, the shift of focus is more hot, is greater. And so your role is always changing about what you have to do with regards to when you have the ball and your team has the ball, or when you don't have the ball and when your team doesn't have the ball. And then, the feelings in those sports, once again, just being able to stay up with the current moment, playing with intensity, understanding what's needed in different moments and how you can kind of raise or lower your intensity based on the context of the game. So how do we go about doing this? What's a kind of a strategy to start? And this is kind of where I want to kind of outline a little bit more information about what you can do as an athlete, and hopefully some things that you can start to take away and apply to your sport. And I should note that these are skills. The things I'm talking about are skills. You're not necessarily just born with them. And if you feel you don't have them, it's not impossible to gain them. You have to put time in, you have to put practice in, you have to challenge yourself. Like anything that you learn, there's always going to be an opportunity where you may not have success right away, but you have to be dedicated and committed to trying and learning and reflecting on that learning in order to really make progress and how you can develop your focus. All right. Think of your brain as a muscle that you have to train and get stronger, similar to what you do in a gym or at a racetrack or a running program. You apply yourself, you look to gain benefits based on the exercises that you're doing, and your focus is no different than that when you're trying to train it. So it starts with just being able to create awareness. What do I need to be thinking? What am I thinking? All right. And this is a difficult skill because it can kind of make us feel uncomfortable a little bit. And it's also really, really hard to recognize that if you just take a moment just to notice how you're feeling as you're sitting here listening to me speak, right? Where's the tension in your body, if there is any? Where are your thoughts right now? Are they thinking about something that you have to do later? Are they thinking about something that you want to do later? or if you forgot to do earlier today? Or are you just able to sit here and listen to me speak and stare into your laptop or tablet or wherever you're kind of calling in from? Being present is the first part. And when we practice this, there's certain parts of your brain that you're working on. Like I said, if I go to a gym and I work out different exercises in my upper body, I know that those exercises are going to make me in time stronger in certain areas of my shoulders, my arms, my chest, whatever the situation, whatever I'm doing as an exercise. When we work on practicing in this way as an athlete, we're working on strengthening parts of our brain, building more neurons in parts of our brain that can increase our ability to focus and direct our attention to the present moment. All right. And so if you sit here and try and just be present and you feel really uncomfortable, it's possible that it's like very difficult to do and your mind's going to immediately shift to something else. All right. And so what we have to understand with that is that we have to be accepting of the fact that acceptance is a big part in our ability to bring focus to ourselves. You're going to understand that in certain moments in your sport are difficult and challenging. And what we have to do here is be aware of how we're feeling and be accepting of those feelings. All right. And so what this does is, this is kind of the introduction to being mindful, is that you're able to kind of take an ability to step back from the thoughts that you think and just observe them for what they are. All right. And when I talk about focus a lot with athletes, the most important thing I can tell you is that you cannot control what thoughts come into your mind. You can't. There's no point in trying to bottle up any negative thought and put it away in a dark corner of your brain and hope that it doesn't appear again, because it will. It always will. All right. However, we can't control what thoughts come into our brain, but we can control our reaction or non-reaction that we have to those thoughts. And that's a really integral part of building effective focus strategies, is that you're looking to notice your thoughts rather than try and control them. All right. And so this is a stage of when we're trying to develop our ability to focus and use mental skills to focus. This is the foundation piece here that we have to take some time to understand and develop before we start to really get into our sport and understand how we can focus more effectively. So where I'm going with this is I'm talking about mindfulness. And this is not necessarily the topic of tonight, but it links closely. And I've actually done presentations like this on mindfulness and sport, and you can find them on our YouTube channel or on our website. I believe it's still up there. And I spoke specifically about how athletes can build mindfulness strategies for their sport. All right. And so this is closely linked to focus. And this is an important slide that I want to bring to your attention. What I'm trying to explain here is that this is actually an exercise that I do with athletes where we outline we color code different areas of attention that you can kind of direct your mind to. Blue is the ultimate. Blue is focusing on the present moment in contact with how we want to be acting in certain situations in our sport. When we notice that if we go into a yellow stage, this is where, and this is more of a debrief afterwards. And I say, okay, well, what was the color? And if the athlete says yellow, it's like, okay, you were focused on distractions, things that pulled you away from what your ultimate focus is. All right. And you may not know what that ultimate focus is. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. An orange focus is an evaluation of your performance. Did the coach think I played well? Did my teammates think I played well? Did my parents think I played well or poorly? Okay. That's one step further from blue. A red focus is, okay, focusing in the moment about, are we going to win? Are we going to lose? What happens in this situation? That's a very stressful place to be, and one that definitely pulls you away from performing at your best. And then a gray focus is things that's completely outside anything to do with your sport. Think about your homework, think about what you're having for dinner later, all those sorts of examples. So the routine that I try and establish is, what can you pay attention to in your environment to just get present? It could be something you can see, something you can touch, something you can listen for. What's your ability to release that thought? All right. And then refocus on the blue. All right. And so this is kind of something that you can't do this and expect immediate results. And that's kind of the opposite of what's intended to do. But you just want to get into a routine of A, recognizing where your thoughts are, B, accepting where they are, and then C, refocusing onto what you need to do. And you may need to do that thousands of times in order to build focus strategies. All right. And that is just what it is. All right. And so when we're talking about trying to focus more effectively, it starts with being aware, being accepting of where your thoughts are at, and then immediately having a strategy to move into a focused state. So I want to outline this with the next slide is an important slide, and it kind of builds this idea a little bit more. And I think it's a bit better visual for you to see. All right. And what I'm going to highlight here is the role that mental skills play in this strategy of recognizing and accepting and then getting present. So I want to break this down with this visual here. You stand in the middle. This is you noticing it. And everything that happens in your sport happens on this page here. All right. And I'm going to break this down. On the top end, we have what's in the physical, what's in the moment, what can everyone see and touch and feel? What is your sport environment? All right. And then below that, what's the experience like in your head? What do you think? What do you feel? What do you notice? On the left-hand side, we have thoughts and actions that move us away from our goals. That could just be performing, embracing your potential. That could be winning. That could be making nationals, making provincials. All right. And on the right side, it could be what are thoughts and actions that move you towards your goals. All right. And so everything that happens in your sport, whether it's an action or a thought, can be brought to this page here. And so I'm going to highlight this a little bit more. Like I said, your job is just to notice where you're at and accept where you're at. Actions that move us away, poor body language, getting frustrated, talking back to the referee, sloppy play, like when we're in possession of a ball, for example, or kind of like not committing to your race plan or not taking the most aggressive line in your race. All right. These are actions, things that everyone can notice. These are things that move us away from our goals. Things that move us towards our goals are when we are in the zone. Okay. What does it look like? We're confident. We're automatic in terms of how we kind of receive and pass. We're just very dialed in. We have good physicality. There's good commitment to what you're doing. I want you to think about, okay, well, what it looks like when you're in the zone. What are some attributes of your play that you can highlight there? If we have things in our head that move us away, we're dwelling on them. We're obsessing over them. We can't go over the past mistakes. We're kind of stuck in a rut. All right. And then the things that move us towards from a mental point of view, living by our values, we're playing, to our strengths. We're proud of what we're doing. All right. So any sort of thought or action, you can label it. Is it moving me towards my goals, or is it a thought or an action that's moving me away from my goals that I have? So the role of mental skills, when we talk about, self-talk, when we talk about imagery, when we talk about breathing, when we talk about routines, when we talk about, anything related to a mental skill that you could learn, it's our ability to notice where we're at. Are we on the left? Are we on the right? And if we're on the left, we use that skill to pull us to the right. All right. And that's the role that mental skills highlight. So everything that I've said up until this point is more about a foundation. All right. If we're going to build focus, we need to have an understanding of some of the things that I've just described here. And this may be the first time you're hearing it. All right. So if it's a lot of new information, maybe it's a lot going on right now. And that's fine, because this is recorded. I recommend you watch it back and just digest the information a second time after hearing it first. It usually helps. But the idea of mental skills, and where I'm going to go next with, what are some mental skills that are important for us? All right. We want to understand where we're at in our head. All right. And have a skill that pulls us left to right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about, what does my effective focus need to look like? All right. And I'm going to highlight this area of the zone. All right. And so when we're playing and competing in this zone we talk about, in that flow state, there's no judgment of am I doing good? Am I doing bad? It's just in the moment. Actually, it's kind of interesting. The parts of your brain that are responsible for evaluation of yourself and evaluation of sense of perspective of whether things are good or bad about how you're playing and how you're competing and within the context of what I'm talking about, those parts of your brain are actually not as activated when you're in flow state. They've studied where blood flow in your brain goes, and blood flow that's responsible for those areas of your brain actually decrease when you're in flow. So your brain's actually working less when you're performing at a higher level. It's kind of interesting to think about. All right. And so how do we develop some strategies that allow us to build that idea of how to get the flow? Is that we have to have an understanding about how we're evaluating our performance, not on a results base, but on a process base. All right. And so I know that there's a few coaches that we have on here tonight. This is probably pretty fresh in your brain from some of our recent work. But what we're talking about here from a process point of view is that we want to have an understanding of, okay, what do I need to be doing really well technically? What do I need to be doing really well tactically in my sport, mentally and physically? What are the attributes that I need to bring to life? All right. And it's not about whether I, do them and I win or do them and I lose. I just need to be focused on doing them. Once again, going back to thinking and feeling about your sport. That was a slide a few moments ago. All right. And so this is important for us to consider. When we're talking about focus, I want you to use this lens. What do I need to be doing in this and this area and this area and this area? So what I mean by these: technical, your technique, your rhythm, your form, your skills, and your sport. Most of the time, any practice that you engage in is in the technical area. All right. The tactical area is your strategy, your decision making. And this looks very different in whether we race sport, have a racing sport, have a subjective sport where you're evaluated by judges, whether you have an individual sport, whether you have a racing sport. What we have here in the mental side, all right, what are the attributes we need to have from a mental point of view? Confidence, concentration. We need to manage our intensity level properly. And from a physical side, we need to be able to, be aware of our endurance, our strength, our work ethic. All right. So when we talk about focus, I want you to think about process focus, not outcome focus, but what do I have to do in these areas? What do I have to think about? What do I have to feel? All right. And this should be the content of like what moves us towards our goals. Okay. And that's an important thing about being in the moment, is that it's just focused on this, because there's no judgment in this. There's no kind of outcome of like win or loss. It's just being able to focus on, am I doing this? And if I'm not, accept it, move to the right. How do we bring this to life? So let's talk about that. How do we bring this to life? I'm going to break down a few different situations that you may find yourself as an athlete. And it's important to understand the relationship between what you do before, what you do during, and what you do after your competition. All right. And so I put a little image of a toolbox here. These are tools that we put in our toolbox for these different situations. So when we're talking about pre-competition routines, all right, I want you to think of like the timeline of your competition. When you play a game or a race, whatever the language is, this is what I'm talking about here. Your ability to be focused is just your ability to transition from one point to the next, one point to the next. All right. And this is how we kind of relate to the role of like what role mental skills have in our overall awareness. Pre-competition routines, they allow us to prepare mentally and physically. They help deal with stress. They provide this familiarity, this comfort. All right. So what I'm talking about here is like these kind of two areas: your personal time that you have before you get to your team event, and then this section of time that you have before competition starts. Here's what we can do in these areas. I should say some of the things we can do in these areas. First of all, you have to be aware of like, what do you need to do ahead of time? What do you need to be thinking of as you get more competitive in your sport? It's not just about showing up and being the fastest kid anymore. You have to do things outside of your sport that have a big impact on what you can accomplish in it, right? So understanding the physical side, your stretching, your foam rolling, you have to take care of your body outside of your sport. What you need to eat, what you need to drink, how you need to prepare the fueling part of your performance is so vital. The routines that you set, the mental side of things, how you manage pain if it's necessary in a racing sport, how you motivate yourself, how you focus on the right thing at the right time. All right, we're going to speak about what these routines can look like. The social piece, especially if you play in tournaments or like multiple kind of races or competitions in one day, knowing yourself, when to be alone, when to see your family, when to be with friends, when to be with teammates, all understanding about how that gets you most effectively ready to compete. And then the equipment piece, if you have a sport that's equipment heavy, preparing it, replacing it, knowing what's going on with your equipment, so it's not a distraction when your competition comes to be. All right, so this is just general things. And I mean, this is an important aspect of it, but I want to get into like a little bit more detail about this mental routine piece here. But I wanted to mention, like, this is the big picture. We need to consider these things as you get more competitive and more older in your sport. Where I want to start here is how we use imagery. All right. How we use our ability to recreate an image of how we'll play. All right. And this is an important aspect of kind of finding abilities to see yourself being focused and seeing yourself have success and seeing yourself being engaged in what you're doing. All right. And so what we're talking about when we use imagery here is the ability to, think and feel what it's going to be like to perform in our sport. Why we use it helps with physical practice. There's lots of research that shows that athletes who use imagery in addition to the practice, they have like greater skill development in their sport. And what that shows and what the research shows is that when you visualize is another term, when you see yourself thinking and feeling, before you get to playing, you actually use parts of your brain that are responsible for, executing skills. All right. Some of the motor part of your brain, motor control brain, it's activated. So we create this blueprint for using our body in a way that's going to help us have success in our sport. And it just provides us, focus strategies, paying attention to what we see, paying attention to what we feel, provides these reminders for us that link to how you can be focused effectively when you're competing in your sport. Using it to prepare in this phase here, we want to be thinking of, where are we playing? Who are we playing against? What's the situation we're arriving into? Another strategy is really around how can you create a highlight reel of your performances from the past? And that's a quick way to do. So if you can kind of just in the moment here, think about, what are some of your best games, big certain moments, like quick moments in those games, that goals, saves, big parts of races that you performed well in, whatever the situation is where you can be proud of how you played. Using this highlight reel is a really good opportunity for you to use imagery in an effective way to prepare. And focusing on good body language, mistakes will happen, but how are you going to react to them? All right. So understanding what your good body language looks like in your sport, head up, shoulders back, not avoiding eye contact, showing your teammates, your coaches, and the opposition that you're not folding in the tent because you made a mistake. That's a really important part here. So having an idea of what that looks like for yourself is a really important part of preparing to be effective and engaged in your sport. What do we need to think about? If I talk, it's great, we can have a highlight reel, we can do this, we can do that. What are the ingredients that we need to have as part of our imagery in order for it to work for ourselves? And this is an important piece for us to consider. You need to have some sort of element, something that you can feel, something you can touch, ideally when you practice and when you do imagery. So if you play basketball, for example, and you got your pregame routine going, where you have your music, your headphones in, and you're thinking about the game, have a basketball in your hand, feel the ball, feel the weight of the ball, feel the dimples on the ball, have something that you can use in order to be effective in terms of what you're going to actually use in your sport. All right. So have a piece of equipment with you, as subtle as it is. Could be just gloves that you wear. It could be a jersey that you wear. It could be a ball that you play, or a lacrosse stick, or a hockey stick, or anything that you can use to bring the tactile thing to life with you is an important part of this. Being aware of your environment, where you're going to be playing, what the situation's like, what are the conditions normally like, and where you're going to be competing. Putting yourself in that situation is an important part here. So, the task, being really specific about what you have to do. This goes back to our process focus. What do I have to be doing in the moment in order to be fully effective and when I'm, how I'm playing. So think about the technical, the tactical, that sort of side thing there. The emotional piece is important. All right. So being able to focus on your emotions and what your best emotions and most effective emotions look like for your performance. And that's something that takes time to build. But what we want to start with is the environment, the task, the perspective. Okay, do you see it from your own eyes, like you're wearing a GoPro, or do you see it from a third-person perspective, like someone's filming your game? All right, and that's an important aspect here. If we're trying to recreate what it's like to feel and play in our sport, see it through your own eyes. If you're trying to think of a strategy or tactics or game plan or race plan, see it from a third person perspective. All right, those are the kind of things that we want to try and understand and tweak in our imagery. And then the timing is important. We're not doing things in slow motion or in super speed. We're just doing them in the time that they take to complete. So for example, your imagery don't necessarily be like 3 minutes long. It'll be like fleeting moments of maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but you pair them together and you repeat them and you see these different situations over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of an important aspect of this, is that we're not like, I'm not, asking to close your eyes for 5 minutes and see 5 minutes just kind of elapse. Like that's not realistic, right? So we want to see things in short, fleeting moments of how they occur in our sport. So I have a video here that I want to share with you that provides a really good example of a biathlon athlete, from an American athlete from the 2018 Winter Olympics. All right. And he talks about what his process for using imagery is. So I will share this with you here. We'll go to, here we go.
"45 minutes or so before the start, you're not thinking about how to ski fast or what it takes to execute the perfect biathlon shot or how much. I tell myself it's just skiing and it's just shooting. I know how to do both of those things well. I ski through it in my mind, and I try to visualize what type of emotions I'm going to feel, what type of pressure I'm going to feel before it actually happens. I'm thinking about the race. I'm thinking about where I'm going to change my technique. If it's slow snow, if it's fast snow, if it's windy, if it's not windy. In my mind, I can see the changing of the digital numbers. And for a moment, I think, can I do this? Am I capable of putting myself through this again? Usually the crowd is screaming, it's pandemonium, but for me, that's the point where the audio and visual come in and become sort of a tunnel where the only thing that I'm focusing on is my own race. And in that moment, I have to repeat to myself, do what you can with what you have where you are. That's a Teddy Roosevelt quote, do what you can with what you have where you are. A song comes on that distracts you for a second, and it's all about getting back into your own zone. And for me, that reset button is just repeating that quote. I look at the snow, I look at where I am. I've got skis on my feet, I've got a rifle on my back. I know how to start the race, I just need to let my body do it. I know that at 10 seconds, I'll hear the audible beeps, and that's the trigger. I'm the bow with the arrow drawn, waiting, and when that beep changes, that's the release. And that's the acceleration, and I'm the arrow, and I'm accelerating down the track. Do what you can with what you have, where you are.
All right. Sorry if that video didn't start right away. It was a technical thing on my end. But so what we talk about there and what the video shows is some really good examples of some things I've talked about tonight, about finding that focus, resetting, having a keyword. That's his kind of left to right sort of process that he has, and how he works in the imagery piece with what he needs to think, what he needs to feel, the emotional side of things, using that kind of metaphor of the arrow and the bow. Those are all things that it's important for every athlete to kind of cultivate their own situation in their sport about how they use imagery to be effective. And the only way to figure that out is to start to try it, and try like just 1 minute, before you play on the day of, and then try and just work it in. What's the highlight reel look like for yourself? What's the body language need to look like for yourself? Who are you playing against? What does your best race look like? The more opportunities, the more content we can give our brain, the more vivid our imagery is going to allow us to be fully focused and prepared on what we're doing. All right. And so that's an important skill that really fits into what we do before competition. It has uses outside of it as well, but I'm just speaking about it in this context here. Okay, so we're talking now about the situation here with our game, our competition, our race, our routine, whatever you compete in, whatever the language is, this is where we're at here. And the important things here that we need to kind of consider is, these are useful because they provide athletes cues to remain focused on what their present moment. They once again help deal with external and internal distractions, and they provide a familiarity, a sense of comfort, and sense of control. If you ever watch golf on TV, you notice any professional golfer that steps up to the ball and you watch them for multiple shots in a round. Next time, take out your phone and press, like, as soon as they step up to the ball, start a timer on your clock on your phone. From the moment they step up to the ball, the moment they swing and make contact, it'll be almost exactly the same amount of time. All right. And so what that tells you is that there's a routine, there's a process that provides comfort, focus, and an ability to have control over the situation. And that's what our competition routines are about, that help us find that effective focus. So one automatic way, and it was kind of spoken there, one thing where this can be a really powerful tool for athletes is how we use our words, how we use our words to ourselves in order to direct our focus to what's important. And like I said, this really ties back to this. Okay, if we have an ability, what our process focus looks like, we need to develop cue words, all right, that bring these things to life in the moment. Reminders. You recognize you're distracted. Okay, accept that. Moving left to right, we have a cue word that allows us to bring this to life. Okay, and so where we're going with this, there's a couple of ways we can do. We can use self-talk. We can use it from more of an instructional point of view. Okay, reminding us about tactics or strategy or form or technique. All right, and this is a go-to reminder about how you direct your focus to what is important at a certain moment in time. All right, and so this is something that we need to kind of think about and consider about what it looks like in our sport. You also have the motivational piece around how to maximize effort, build your confidence, boost your mood, increase your self-belief. All right, and these are also aspects of how we can use self-talk. So if I go to a little bit here, and I have another video, a couple videos of things I want to show you here. All right, and they're just short videos, but there's one kind of example for each. And I'm going to start with the motivational one, and we'll go from there. We'll see if we have time for the second one, but I may just show the motivational one here first. All right. So this is a video from a Nike football, and this is a goalkeeper named Joe Hart, and he talks about how self-talk can be used before performance and how it can motivate and build his quality and his belief in himself.
Our thoughts, they have a huge impact on how we feel. If you can learn how to think before a game, you can influence your performance on the pitch. Self-talk is a technique that positively manages your inner voice. It only takes a few minutes and helps you prepare for the 90 ahead. Let any negative thoughts go and replace them with the positive I can or I will statements, like I can stop anything or I will dominate my area. It helps if you recall a great performance from the past. My pre-game routine takes me back to the Camp Nou. Barcelona versus Manchester City, March 17th, 2015. The world's most feared attack threw everything they had at me that night.
Neymar's in, and Joe Hart is flying out to great effect.
I stood up to it. Now, I mentally replay every save I made.
Beaten away by Hart.
I draw on the positive feelings they gave me at the time.
Hart needed again. He's there again.
My routine fills me with the belief that I will play at my best. It makes me realize the only person who can beat me is me.
All right, so a really good example of how we can use self-talk as a way to motivate ourselves and create that sense of self-belief. Those statements are so important. I can, I am, I will. those are things that we want to have, once again, build within our own mind and remind ourselves of and go to in moments of pressure. All right. And so what is involved in that is your preparation of determining what you're going to say. You have to do it in the moment, and then you have to reflect on how it worked and how you could adjust it. And you have to go through that process a couple different times in order for it to really solidify as a good habit. All right. And so that's an important aspect of this as well, and how we can use self-talk as a way to focus on what's important. The other aspect of this, and I'm not going to show the video because I want to just speak to it with a couple slides here, but it's on this instructional side here. So I'm going to give an example because I've talked a lot about some team sport stuff, but so let's talk about some races here. For any racing athletes here, having different keywords that bring about an idea of what you have to do at different stages of the race is an important aspect of this as well. Having this ability to adjust and have these words that pull you towards your best performance. Once again, recognizing when you're distracted, noticing you're on the left, accepting it, using something that helps you move right. And this is a lot more detailed within the context of a race where, there's different goals, different objectives related to the process of how you want to do it. And these words are actions. They're verbs. They're something that you do. And that's really important when we talk about instructional self-talk. It's an action, one or two words. It's usually a verb. All right. And it's something that brings about what you can do in the moment in order to direct your focus to what's important. All right. And so this is something that, we want to kind of be aware of. And once again, it goes back to how well you can identify your process. What's a keyword that relates to a technical skill that you have to execute? What's a keyword that relates to a tactical aspect of your sport that you have to execute? All right. And this is where these kind of fall into place. And this is the role that this can have in your overall performance. All right. And so when you're very kind of detailed like this, you're able to kind of direct your energy and focus to the right thing at the right time. Another way we can work on this and kind of to build into this a little bit is think about any aspect of your sport. If you're a racing sport, it's the start of the race in this pre-start here. You're in total control of that moment. If you're a soccer player and you take a free kick or a corner kick or a goal kick, you are in control of that moment. If you are a tennis player or a volleyball player or a pitcher, and there's a serve or a pitch or anything like that, there's a brief moment in time in your sport, and usually multiple times, where you are in control of that moment. There's lots of different examples I can think of here. So we want to outline what a performance routine looks like. And when we talk about performance routines, we want to be linking our focus to our senses, all right? How we can focus in the moment. I talked about the example of the golfers. What can we use to gain our attention visually and physically? What can we touch? What can we feel? All right, so a basketball player will spin the ball in their hands. They'll bounce it a couple times. What's a visual cue you can bring yourself to? Looking at the rim in a free throw, all right? Taking a deep breath and then executing. And when you play sports and you establish routines and you feel that they work for you, and then you get distracted in other times and abandon those routines, you probably don't execute the skills as well as you want to. So these are important little checklists that our brain can go into, and it takes time to develop them, and then they get more and more automatic as we do them in our sport. But this is an important aspect of what we can do in competition. So I want to ask yourself, think to yourself, what does your routine look like? What purpose does it serve? And what elements go into an effective routine for you, whether it's a free throw or a free kick or a serve, or kind of starting at the gate or starting on the block of, in a racing sport. All right. What are your routines that allow you to really excel in the moment? So where I want to touch on finally here, and I want to leave a little bit of time for any questions that we have at the end, is what we do after a competition. All right. So this is the period of time. After the competition is ended. All right. What do we do in this space here? We reflect on what happened. We can process emotions that are related to the game. This is an important aspect of sports psychology and mental performance. We don't spend enough time thinking about what happens after. It's all the focus is in what happened during, maybe what happened before, but after is where the learning happens. All right. And if we don't give ourselves time to debrief, to reflect, to journal, to have important conversations, we don't usually deal with emotions the right way. And we don't usually figure out what we need to do to improve our focus for our next time. that we competed. All right. So here's kind of an outline of where I want to talk about. These are things that athletes should do after a game, and they don't necessarily all take the same amount of time. All right. But it's important that we go through a process where we release what happened, release the emotions, vent, feel frustrated, feel happy, feel positive, feel sad, feel your emotions. All right. It's important that we don't bottle them up and ignore them. All right. And so people do this in different ways. Sometimes they sit with them. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they need to talk. Sometimes they need a hug. You deal with your emotions. It's really important that we kind of tick this box off. Then, we need to recharge our situation. So what that means is, like, you need to refuel, you need to get energy, you need to get carbs, you need to get protein. Allison Quinlan, she gave a talk a couple months ago, maybe a month ago. You can find it on YouTube, about what athletes need to eat, in between around competition. All right. And so that's definitely her specialty. But it's an important part of mentally about what we have to do in the moment. Taking opportunities to refresh. All right. So, whether that's, you shower after a game, or you change out of your jersey and your clothes, you put something comfortable on, you take moments to kind of just make yourself feel good. Then you do these things before you review. All right. If we review with no emotions dealt with, it's not going to be a positive experience for you. You're not going to see things in an objective point of view. You're not going to see things with a sense of acceptance. All right. So we need to understand how we go through this process here in order to make sure that we review things with our coach. If there's a video in your sport that you can review, if there's stats that you can look at, if there's conversations you can have, there's opinions that you can get that you value, take those opportunity to review your performance in that way and base it on, okay, did I live by my process or did I not? That's an effective tool that we can use. And we do these things which allow us then to refocus. So if you play a sport where there's multiple games in a day, multiple races in a day, multiple routines in a day, we go back to, like I said, this time here. All right, this personal time, warm-up time. And this is our re-enter phase, or refocus phase, I should say, of this process. So a little bit more detail on these. What we can do, what are some tips we can look at in each of these 3 areas or 5 areas? Release the emotions. Like I said, it's acceptable to have an emotional reaction, except the reaction shouldn't interfere with anything that, future training or competition. But it's important that we deal with these emotions. The physical and mental, parts of recovery. All right, opportunity to take a step back. Music, personal space, finding the right energy of people to speak with, taking in fluids, refreshing. This is an important part of this. Stretching, foam rolling, ice, whatever the situation is, take care of your body. In that moment, then look at what happened from the past race or performance. What do you want to focus on going forward to the next? A stoplight exercise can be good. What did I do well? What do I want to keep? What do I want to not? What do I want to continue to do? What do I want to start doing? And what do I want to stop doing around my next performance? It's kind of a quick exercise that you can do with athletes. It could just be like one thing in each. All right. Especially if you play or compete multiple times in a day, that helps you reset your focus. And then you reconnect with your preparation phase. You stay present and you accept what's happened and look at it as an opportunity to improve. All right. And so this is an important aspect of performance that we don't necessarily spend a lot of time in or get a lot of support in, but it really has a big impact on how everything else pieces together. As we kind of wind into the last few minutes here, I wanted to highlight something that's available to you at PacificSport. I meet with athletes one-on-one. I meet with groups and teams, but we also have an opportunity for you if you're interested in learning more about some of the things I talked about. We have a mental training course that's available to you, and it's a self-paced course that I built, and it uses the Google Classroom platform, but it looks at how we can improve these different areas in our sport around how we can set effective goals, how we can build confidence, how we can develop a stronger performance mindset. And that's definitely where a lot of this content that I spoke about tonight fits into. And then how we can manage stress and recover, and tie all these kind of pieces together here. All right. And so, like I said, if you're interested in this, there's more information available at our website, PacificSportVI.com. And if you go to the mental performance page, you'll see more information on this mental training course that you can take. The cost is about $200 for this course, but there are payment plans available for you, and it is just kind of a more of a cost-friendly way to look at how you can kind of over time build in, and you can go at your own pace. You can do it intensively. You can do it kind of one module a month. All right, and there's an opportunity there for you to kind of improve some of the an important aspect of your performance. So you can look at it as an opportunity to kind of invest in yourself as an athlete and build out different ways in which you can improve mental skills that relate to what you do in your sport. So that's it from me. I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. And if there's more information, if you have any questions about tonight, use my email as well if they come afterwards. I'll also welcome this time to ask anyone on the call if you have any questions about what I spoke about. And yeah, so once again, I thank you for taking the time to tune in. Yeah, thanks for joining. If there's any questions, please ask away. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Great. All right. So if there's no questions, yeah, feel free to sign out. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Okay, I see one there from Claudia. Any tips on grounding techniques and strategies? Yeah, Claudia, I think one of the more important things there is learning how to breathe effectively when you're stressed in the pre-performance phase. Understanding how to breathe to calm down, engaging your diaphragm and making sure that your inhale and your exhale are equal, or your exhale is longer than your inhale. I think your breath is so important because that your breath is you feel it, you experience it, and you own it. And so that's something that can really bring you back to the present moment and ground you in that situation. So looking up like diaphragmatic breathing exercises, understand the mechanics of what that means to breathe and engage your diaphragm. That's a really important part because athletes can think they're breathing to calm down, but they're breathing in the wrong way. And it's actually kind of like throwing gas on the fire rather than trying to put out the flame of any sort of nerves or intensity or anxiety that you may experience. So that's a really important one. It's called a 3-2-5 breath, where you inhale for 3 counts, you hold for 2, and then a slow exhale for 5 counts. That's a good kind of thing to practice before you feel it in competition. That's a really important part here, is that you go back to challenge and skill. If you're learning something, don't put yourself in the most challenging situation to test it out, because that may not work out as well as you want it to. I'll put that in the chat. 3, 2, 5. Awesome. All right. If there's no other questions, once again, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to catch you online next time we do this again. Thanks a lot, everyone.